Now, to talk about one of the hottest JavaScript frameworks, we have André Silva from WIT Software.
I'm André Silva from WIT Software, and I'm here to talk about AngularJS. Can I make a quick poll? How many web developers do we have here? Great. How many of you use Angular? Okay, great. For the rest of you, I will explain what Angular is. Since we are at Commit Porto and we are talking about new technologies, I will try to explain you Angular as a new technology and what it brings into web development nowadays. So there are many JavaScript frameworks now. People are migrating their web pages to these web frameworks and also other. But I'm here, basically we are using it because we are moving the applications into the client side. But JavaScript can really be a messy language because you can ask 10 web developers to do the same web application, and when you go in the end and you look at the code structure, you will have very, very, very different projects. So in order to avoid spaghetti applications, we need layers. We can still have spaghetti, okay, because you will have spaghetti on the views, spaghetti on the controllers, and also on the services. But we need to at least have layers because in the end it's JavaScript. So Angular and also the other frameworks, they are trying to force you to organize your code and to do it right. And it's maintained by Google. They started it, and it's focused on HTML to build single-page applications where you don't need to reload the page and to go and get another HTML. So everything is handled on the client side. It tries to force you to use some MVC-like pattern, and it works in every browser. You don't need to understand HTML, but this is a typical HTML piece of code, and it seems like only HTML, but there are some Angular there, and what it aims is Google, when they built the AngularJS, they were trying to make that what HTML would have been if it was made for web apps, meaning that we should have the HTML for content, CSS for presentation, and JavaScript for the logic. And this is mainly because we want the separation of concerns like we have in other platforms, and we also want that for the web. So basically with AngularJS we will have a controller, and we say from this div on we will have a controller that will control that part of the code. And we can have a model name, for example, and we say that there will be the place, the piece of information that is on the model. Also, we can have, for example, here the two-way binding, so that the value that is on the model message will be always on the input, and when you change the input, the value will be automatically in the model message. And also you can define, for example, functions, where you can have the definition of that function in the controller and not across available in all the application, for example, in the window object. So this is HTML on steroids. Because it's HTML, we don't have a different language to write the view, but it has some points where you get the steroids, and basically you don't have to do the manual manipulation. You don't have to use it. You use JavaScript to go to the server, pick the data, process the data, go and get element by ID, and then inner HTML equals this. You don't have to do that. You just need to change the controller, and the view will automatically be updated. And this is a controller, so it's simply a function where you define the model and where you define the functions that you want available on that part of the application. And then there's scope. And what's scope? Scope is basically everything on the view for an AngularJS application. Everything that you have on the DOM, each HTML element will have a scope. So this will be a tree of scopes, and when we define a controller, basically you are extending the scope and saying this scope will have a login function, for example, and in an inner scope, in a child of that scope, you can call the login function and it will go searching in the parent, and when it finds it, uses it. And this is pretty much how the views work. But Angular has a lot of modules that you can use. You have controllers, service, filters, directives to extend the code, the HTML. You can create new attributes, new elements. And basically you define it like this. You say, I want to have this controller, this service, this filter. And what this will allow is that you are naming the services. So then when building, for example, a service, you are saying this is a business manager. Here is where you want to put the processment of the application. You don't want to have too many functions and data on the controller. The controller is there only to show some part of the data, and the controller will be destroyed once that DOM element gets out of the page. So you want it to quickly die and quickly born. So you want cheaper controllers, and you want all the data inside the services. And here we see we can register some of the elements. We can register service, for example, data manager or chat service. We will define it as an AngularJS module, and then you can inject it in controllers, in services, so they will be available for you to use it. And there are a lot more to discover. AngularJS is really big, but I don't have too many time now. So, for example, design patterns, they are good, right? I suppose everyone thinks they are good. So someone somewhere took some time and thought, yeah, this is a good way to structure code. This is a good way to do something. So these are the design patterns, and you can find a lot of them in the AngularJS framework. You have the factory where you define a function, and now it's there. You just go and use a factory design pattern, and you don't know that you are using. So this will force you. Nobody forces you to do nothing, but it's there. You will use it. So in the end, you will have a better code, spaghetti code, but better spaghetti. So, pre-concluding, AngularJS is great. It's really great. We are using it at WIT in some projects, and we are getting really faster development because we are getting better at Angular. But and we are really structuring our applications now. We think, in our view, that is good code. But it's not magic, right? It needs to have some mechanism there for this to happen. And the magic there are watchers, okay? Each time you put, here you have a cycle, okay? Each time you put an ng repeat to iterate over the message and build that view for each message, you can put an ng repeat, an ng switch, ng if, ng source to define the image. You can put all of these elements in the view. And what Angular will do is to add a watcher for each time you put one of these things in the view. So in the scope, where the element where you put the tag, a watcher will be added, and that watcher will be called when a digest cycle detects changes. So A digest cycle is what comes from one point of the application, so from the root scope, for example, it's the topmost scope, and it will run all the watchers to know if there is a difference. If there is a difference, then the model is updated and the view is updated. So this is a cycle, and the cycle name is there. So this is a cycle because it will run once, it will do the changes, it will run, and it will only stop when those changes are found. And then the application is stable, okay? Nothing is running there. The thing is, this works. It works pretty well. The thing, as always, it's when you make it big, there comes the problems. At WIT, we are, yeah, it's just that. At WIT, we are creating an application. I think this was the first project that we created with Angular. This is the third version of it. And basically, it's a software for operators, for telecommunications operators, for users to have their contact list there. They will be able to make calls, send and receive SMSs. So this is an Angular application. We have the contact list, we have the chat view where you have the chats you have with your contacts. You have a timeline with all the message. You have social timeline where you have your friends' posts to drag and drop to the chat list. And you have calls, okay? You have the footer there with a call, you have video calls, and you also have a list with a call history. Okay, the problem is when you have a really big application with all that data to process, you will have watchers everywhere, okay? You have many lists, you saw the lists there. Each list will have many scopes. If you repeat it, it will have that multiplied by the number of elements in the list. And some say, I never read it in some Google documentation, but it's a known fact that a smooth app will have a maximum of 2,000 watchers. Okay, so you really need to simplify your views, to simplify the elements that you will be repeating, and use one-time bindings. The new Angular version will have this, it already has the one-time binding. And also before that we have a plugin that was bind once. And what we do is we use a different tag in the HTML, and this will go and pick the value from the model. It will put it in the UI, and it will never be updated again. So it's great when you know that the data is not being updated, that it will never be updated in the model. Then it's a good time for use a one-time binding tag. Then there's scope apply. I talked to you about the digest cycle. The digest cycle, it's what makes the view being updated. The problem is it's not always running. It will run once a change is detected or something in the view, like a click or an event from the server. You want the cycle to run, and you don't need to do anything. It will just run. But sometimes it won't. For example, for that, scope apply, it's what Angular will call, because something changed, and the application will not know if this will affect only this part of the view or all the view. So a scope apply will do a root scope digest. It will start at the topmost scope, and it will run all the watchers in the application. The thing is, you saw here we have a time, a duration for the call, and a duration will be incrementing. So how do we increment a duration in JavaScript? We have the start of the call, and we have the actual time. We get the difference, and we have the duration. So we do this using a timeout. And if we use this $timeout function, that it's a AngularJS function, what we will get is that it will run our code, and where we will be making the difference, and then we'll call a scope apply. And what happens? because we want to update that part of the view and we want the duration to be moving, we will be running all the watchers in the application, and because we know that there's only the duration to update. So instead of that, what we need to do is to call a simple set timeout, and you call it in the controller that has that part of the view, and there you will call scope digest. So if you call the scope digest, it will be only that scope to do the digest, and you will have that part of the application to being watched and not all of it. So that's what you need to do. You need to know where to call scope digest. And with Angular, it's always it's really simple to use it, but you need to not using the easiest way, because if you only call scope apply, it's great, it works. But when you get really complicated views, it can be heavy. Then there's broadcast. Broadcast it's a way of calling events across the application. Each scope has a on for you to register, emit to go upwards events, and broadcast to launch events downwards. And just like apply, it's simple. You can go to root scope and call broadcast, it will work. It will go to all the scopes and it will work. The thing is, you don't need that, okay? You want to control where you want your events to work, and even it's better to, if you are going to do that, maybe an emit will do the work for you, and an emit will go to your grandparent, and the broadcast will, every scope is a child of the grandparent, the root scope. So it will be a problem because all scopes will be contacts. So you need to control this. Then there's ng-show and ng-if. If will remove the view from the DOM. Okay, there's a boolean there. If it's true or false, the DOM will be or not, the element will be or not in the DOM. So you have, for example, there on the top, you have 3 tabs. And Angular provides us the ng switch. Okay, it's perfect for a tab. You have a value that is a selected tab, and you have a switch. This view will appear in that case, and that case. We'll have 3 cases, and the views will appear. The thing is, ng switch will do ng-if. It will remove the element from the DOM. And in that particular application, when you move to tabs, to the contact tab, you will have a huge contact list. And there you saw there are many elements in the view. You have the shot list, the social timeline, many elements. So you don't want this to just be removed from the application, from the DOM, each time you change the tab, because when you go back to the contacts, a lot of things needs to be rebuilt. So this is where you will not use ng-switch, and you will use ng-show just to hide the parts of the application that you don't want the user to see at this point. And then I'm summing up now. Imperative Angular, you know imperative programming, right? I think everyone, okay, imperative programming, you have cycles, you have the conditionals, and when you look at this part of the code, with Angular, you see there ng repeat, and this will be a for each. Okay, everyone looking at this part of the code will see we will be iterating the message, and the value will be in the message, and we will be repeating the div that it's inside, and also the li element, li. So when we do a for cycle, we know how to. It's easy for us to see. Okay, this can be improved. We can break here because we already have the value that we want. We can do a continue in a sooner than in the end of the application. But this is not simple for each, because it will run many, many times, okay? And it's not a simple for. You need to have the notion of that, because there's the digest cycle, and the data is not really just a for that you know that will run in that specific case and that you will control. So what you should do in order to have notion of these problems is to really separate your application. You need to know the parts of the application that you are building and structure it in order to have lighter events, lighter digests, because you know that part of the application is being updated. So do the digests just there, and don't make it easy and just call broadcast from the root scope or scope apply that will run through all the application. So if you want to use Angular, it's a great tool, but you really need to read the manual. Even for small applications, they can be better. They can be optimized to run because it supports every browser, but when you go to Internet Explorer, it's complicated. You need to watch your watchers, because you need to keep in mind how many watchers do your application have at any time. There are some really good Chrome plugins to use, where you can see the values that are on the scope, and you can see the tree structure for the scopes. And also, as I said before, keep your controllers simple, because think about them as being only an extension of a scope. So it will be being and not being in the UI really, really fast. So like I said, and to sum it up, it's great. You will have less spaghetti code, for sure. But you really should know how to use it and how it works from day one. And I hope I have enlightened some of you to make better web apps with this talk. Thank you.
So we still have time for one question. Does anyone want? Over here. You have the floor. Yeah.
No.
Okay. This is not directly related with Angular. It's directly related to any framework used to do client rendering. Okay. So my question is very simple. Do you think that at this point, presently, how search engine works, do you think it's a concern to do the rendering on the client side due to search engine optimizations? Or do you think that we should keep it on the server side? I mean, in web apps that that you sell to companies, that shouldn't be an issue, because you aren't worried about search engine optimization. But for a normal website, do you think that's still an issue to do client rendering?
That's a good question. I had a slide there, many more, but I had to remove it, and that would explain that. In the past, we had the applications made on the server, and you just go there and you get the ready to show HTML. Nowadays, you don't have it. You have Google Spreadsheet. What's that? It has, I suppose, a lot of workers behind it. So we are using maybe threads behind to do all the calculations. And with JavaScript, the new API JavaScript for example, you have the offline apps. There's nothing more client-side than an offline app, okay? You put the code there, you cut off the connection to the server, and it just works. So you need to do it on the browser. I don't think that it's mandatory, because you have a lot of use cases. So I think there's the client side will always be a good user experience for the user, because it will not have the page reload. And yes, we have Ajax in the past, but I think don't go to the server and pick new HTML and just go and pick the data and make the HTML this way or with any other framework, it will be a good solution to use in the client side, and in the end it will always depend on the requests you have from your client for the application.
Thanks.
Okay. Once again, a round of applause to our 3 speakers. Yeah.